frozen solid to the freezing pavement. I turn away as if I do not see.
You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're talking about Lotus Gait, track number 11 on 2012's Failed States LP.
I don't know about you, but this is a completely haunting tune to me. The visuals are powerful. The title is eerie and mysterious. You know, a lot of the statements going on about our society and the ways in which we are existing in the world, are super prescient to me whenever I think about Lotus Gait. I love the story songs. I feel like this song has a story within it. And I feel like Propaganda, is doing a really, really interesting piece on this. And that, it's like a damaging piece of being human is what this song is sort of about to me. And the vivid imagery of a song like this keeps me sucked in and thinking about it with each passing year as I become more complacent and sucked into the virtual worlds of abject avoidance of problems and everything. And even though this song is 8 years old now, it doesn't seem to age. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Greg, it really blends clever metaphors, narrative storytelling, and just incredible musicianship with music that also at times is eerie, all in a way to create a song that up until this point, I don't think I had really heard anything like this from the band so far. And to understand the song, I think we need to go over the title first, which the history of is pretty terrifying.
For definitions purposes, we'll kind of go over what Lotus Gait means, and we have some history here that we can talk about before we get into our interview portion for the show. So the Lotus Gait is based on the practice of foot binding, and a gait, the word gait, G-A-I-T, is a manner of walking, and the Lotus Gait was developed by women with bound feet who developed a tightness in pelvic muscles. The lotus terminology refers to the term lotus feet, which is what bound feet were called after they had been broken and bound into certain shapes.
So, Greg, I found from the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, the exact origins of foot binding are unknown, but the earliest evidence of shoes used for foot binding were found in about the 12th century from tombs from that era. And most foot binding was practiced almost exclusively by upper-class Han Chinese women, but the custom spread as the ruling dynasty actually tried to ban it later on.
Yeah, and I was digging around for some articles on foot binding as well, and I found an article from Louisa Lim at NPR, who wrote a brief history of foot binding. And something in her article says, historical records from the Song dynasty, which was 960 to 1279 CE, date foot binding as beginning during the reign of Li Yu, who ruled over one region of China between 961 and 975. And it is said his heart was captured by a concubine, Yao Niang, a talented dancer who bound her feet to suggest the shape of a new moon and performed a lotus dance. And during the subsequent dynasties, foot binding became more popular and spread from court circles through the wealthy circles as well. And then eventually it moved from the cities to the countryside, where young girls realized that binding their feet could be their passport to social upward mobility and wealth, which was horrendous to think about. And then the Manchu nobility came to power in the 1640s, and they tried to ban it, but they were not successful. And so anti-foot binding committees were formed in Shanghai by British priests in the 1870s. But the practice was officially outlawed in 1912 when the Qing dynasty had already been toppled by a revolution. So in 1915, government inspectors began levying fines on those who continued to bind their feet. But according to American author William Rossi, who wrote a book called The Sex Life of the Foot and Shoe, 40 to 50% of Chinese women had bound feet in the 19th century.
Wow.
So we're talking huge amounts of people.
Yeah.
And for the upper classes, the figure was almost 100%. So if you were a 19th century Chinese woman, you had money and you came from money, your feet were broken and bound. And then some estimate that as many as 2 billion Chinese women throughout history broke and bound their feet to attain this ideal of physical perfection. And there was an author named Yang who says that women with tiny feet were status symbols who would bring honor upon their entire clan just simply based on their foot appearance. And then there was one more article that I found from the Los Angeles Times, which came out in 1996. And this is a quote from the article. When a girl was about 6, she'd be taken, so this is disturbing stuff here, people, often crying and screaming, to a foot binding stool. And then for softening up, the feet might be soaked in a broth of monkey bones. Then a cotton bandage about 3 inches wide and 10 feet long would be wrapped around each foot in a figure 8, and the big toes were left free. And as the feet were rebound tighter and tighter, over 2 years, the child's other toes were broken and forced flat against the soles, which you can find images of if you do some Google image searches of all this stuff. It's all out there. And the arches were broken, the heels were drawn forward. And so picture a fist turned on end and the thumb representing the big toe. And apparently in 1996, there were still 1 million women in China who had feet that were broken. So virtually every Han Chinese woman born before 1943 had this, and millions were still alive in the 90s when that article came out.
From that same resource I found from the Peabody Museum, it said the ideal lotus foot was 3 inches long, but the average length of lotus shoes in Western collections is 5 to 5.5 inches. So the length of the shoe, however, does not accurately portray the length of the foot. The lotus shoe, combined with leg wrappings, was designed to create an illusion of smallness. Foot binding reduced the length of the foot by rearranging its bones and tissue, but it cannot remove the mass or the volume of the foot. The volume had to be accommodated, and smallness could be interpreted in a variety of ways: the short profile, the narrow instep, and the slim ankle. Those women who fell short of the ideal 3-inch golden lotus resorted to a variety of techniques to give the illusion of tiny feet. For example, lifts inserted into the heel of the shoe raise the heel above the back of the shoe to be hidden by wrappings or hemlines, and a heel or an arched sole shortened the profile, and a high cuff on the shoe gave the impression of a foot the width of an ankle. And I read one thing, it was a quote from an oral history that talked about a woman who had her feet bound. You can imagine limited mobility and the difficulty in walking pretty much anywhere, needing to be accompanied, but this intentionally and purposefully creating disabilities within people. And even further from that, so an additional intentional effect of foot binding was the Lotus Gait, as Greg mentioned, the tiny steps women had to take, swaying back and forth if they had their feet bound. And these women had to avoid placing weight on the front of their feet because they had been so deformed with their toes curled underneath. So they had to walk almost exclusively on their heels. So the gait, the walk, included slightly bending the knees and swaying to maintain balance, like a delicate movement that some men found attractive. And on top of that, some men found the smell of bound feet attractive, and others believed that bound feet would actually alter the physical anatomy of a woman's vagina.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot there. So this is utterly disturbing stuff. You know, I found some other stuff as well, and there's so much out there on this. I mean, you could read about this forever, but I found an article from the Scientific American from an issue in December 18th, 1880. Yes, I said 1880 because Scientific American as a magazine was founded in 1845. But there's an article I found from 1880 called Chinese Women's Feet, which is very disturbing. And if longtime listeners of this show will remember, whenever we did the humane meat episode, I read a long passage out of Sandor Katz' book where I was like on the verge of physical sickness while I was reading it. I was going to read this entire article for this episode, but fortunately, I found an organization called LibriVox, which is an audio recording project that puts old recordings of periodicals into audio form. They put old articles into audio form, and then they put those audio recordings into the public domain. So what we have now is a 4-minute and 29-second long recording of an article written about Chinese foot binding, which came out in a December 1880 issue of the Scientific American. So enjoy.
Chinese Women's Feet, from the Scientific American, Volume 43, Number 25, December 18, 1880. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chinese Women's Feet. An American missionary, Miss Norwood of Swatow, recently described in a Times paragraph how the size of the foot is reduced in Chinese women. The binding of the feet is not begun till the child has learned to walk. The bandages are specially manufactured and are about 2 inches wide and 2 yards long for the first year, 5 yards long for subsequent years. The end of the strip is laid on the inside of the foot at the instep, then carried over the toes, under the foot, and round the heel, the toes being thus drawn toward and over the sole, while a bulge is produced on the instep, and a deep indentation in the sole. Successive layers of bandages are used till the strip is all used, and the end is then sewn tightly down. The foot is so squeezed upward that, in walking, only the ball of the great toe touches the ground. After a month the foot is put in hot water to soak some time, then the bandage is carefully unwound, much dead cuticle coming off with it. Frequently, too, 1 or 2 toes may even drop off, in which case the woman feels afterward repaid by having smaller and more delicate feet. Each time the bandage is taken off, the foot is kneaded to make the joints more flexible, and is then bound up again as quickly as possible with a fresh bandage, which is drawn up more tightly. During the first year the pain is so intense that the sufferer can do nothing, and for about 2 years the foot aches continually, and is the seat of a pain which is like the pricking of sharp needles. With continued rigorous binding, the foot in 2 years becomes dead and ceases to ache, and the whole leg, from the knee downward, becomes shrunk so as to be little more than skin and bone. When once formed, the golden lily, as the Chinese lady calls her delicate little foot, can never recover its original shape. Our illustrations show the foot both bandaged and unbandaged, and are from photographs kindly forwarded by Mr. J. W. Bennington, R.N., who writes, "It is an error to suppose, as many do, that it is only the upper 10 among the daughters of China that indulge in the luxury of golden lilies, as it is extremely common among every class, even to the very poorest, notably the poor sewing women one sees in every Chinese city and town, who can barely manage to hobble from house to house seeking work. The pain endured while under the operation is so severe and continuous that the poor girls never sleep for long periods without the aid of strong narcotics, and then only but fitfully. And it is from this constant suffering that the peculiar sullen or stolid look so often seen on the woman's face is derived. The origin of this custom is involved in mystery to the Westerns. Some say that the strong-minded among the ladies wanted to interfere in politics, and that there is a general liking for visiting, chattering, and gossip, and China women can chatter and gossip, both and all of which inclinations their lords desired and desire to stop by crippling them." End of Chinese Women's Feet, From the Scientific American, Volume 43, Number 25, December 18, 1880. Read by Avai in August 2011.
Well, what did you think about that?
Greg, that's incredibly disturbing, but ultimately necessary in understanding the metaphors within the lyrics of Lotus Gait and also just the meaning of the song as a whole. So who do we have for our guest? Let's talk about something positive.
So our guest on this episode is Tim Browne, who is vocalist and guitarist of the band Elway from Colorado. Elway is on Red Scare Industries. I really love Elway. I've been a fan of them for about 9 or 10 years now. The first time I ever saw Elway was in a parking lot in St. Louis with Sprainard, Toys That Kill, and The Arrivals, which was a really cool show. They have records out called Too Bad, Delusions, Leave Taking, Better Whenever, and For the Sake of the Bit. So you can check out Elway at elwaytheband.bandcamp.com, or you can find their stuff at redscare.net. But Tim and I got in touch after we'd been doing this podcast for a while because he has listened to the show a couple times, and he got in touch, and I was like, you should just be on the show. So I asked him what song he wanted, and he said Lotus Gait, and I am darn glad that he selected it because I went full-on rant mode in this conversation after a while, and Tim went right along on the ride with me. I was having not a super great day whenever we recorded this, so like I went hard on this interview, man.
Yeah.
And I got slightly existential, and Tim was right there with me, and it was totally awesome. So cheers to Tim. Check out Elway, and we will be back after this conversation on loving Propagandy, touring with Propagandy, and loving failed states, and then the song Lotus Gait. So we'll be back in just a little bit.
New post-traumatic stress worldwide disorder. A Stockholm syndrome fifth the state. Desperate to batten down the mountain horror and shuffle on in a global Lotus Gait. Content to marinade.
Tim Browne, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Tim, maybe a lot of people already know who you are who are listening, but for those who don't, maybe you could introduce yourself just a tad for our listeners out there.
Well, I play guitar and sing in a band called Elway, and I've been a Propagandy fan my entire life, and I'm kind of nerdy about it, and thus I'm here.
Awesome. Well, I'm super stoked to have you, Tim. It's really great. So I have a little Elway history that I want to go down with you for just a second, if we can. The first time I saw Elway, I saw your band with Sprainard in St. Louis one time in a parking lot on the side of a restaurant called El Leñador. And I'm curious if you remember anything about that insanely weird show and how you wound up playing outside in the middle of an afternoon on Cherokee in St. Louis.
Well, I do remember that show quite vividly. So we were on our way back to Colorado from Pooza Fest, I think, because it was in May or something.
Yeah, it was nice out.
Yeah, it was. It was gorgeous. We, gosh, I can't even. So I remember during the day we went to Ted Drew's because we were in St. Louis, and you got to. And I don't know, for one reason or another, we were put on the show. I think that Toys That Kill and The Arrivals were playing inside. And then Sprainard and us, we got added on, but for whatever reason. So during the first few hours of the show, we're playing out in the parking lot. I remember it sounding awful, but we wound up sitting on there. We met some people who lived right behind El Leñador there. I can't remember what their name. Oh, there are three of them. Got one guy named Dre, one guy named Tay, and one named N.O., I think. Like
awesome.
From New Orleans. And we drank Bud Ice on their steps and waited for Toys That Kill and The Arrivals to play, which was sweet.
Yeah.
Definitely a cool show. This was it was I remember because the day before we were in Kansas City, and or maybe it was the day after. It was either the day after or the day before in Kansas City. And I did an interview on Jim Rome is Burning, his like ESPN show.
Oh my God.
With all of that John Elway business.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. That was like such a strange evening, but you know, it was awesome seeing you and Sprainard on that show. And like Sprainard is like obviously a very underrated band as well. Like I absolutely loved their records, and that show to me, like it stands out in my memory just because of how bizarre it was, but because of how freaking awesome it was too. And seeing Toys That Kill was absolutely fantastic also.
Yeah, and the Arrivals. I mean,
Yeah.
and Sprainard had just put out Untitled, which is my favorite Sprainard record. And God, I just love seeing Pat, their drummer, play drums. He's great.
Absolutely. And like seeing him like playing drums in a parking lot on the side of with a brick wall of a building to his back too, just set up on the parking lot. I mean, you just don't really get any greater than that. You know, those are the kinds of shows that just stand out in my memory forever. And, you know, I'm super glad to have Elway as a part of one of those memories, because it was just such an amazing show that stands out forever. And like, I'm just so glad that we can just geek out about that, because that was just so random and strange. And I loved everything about it so much, because El Leñador was, I mean, I don't even know if it's still there. I don't live in St. Louis anymore, but what an interesting afternoon that was. So anyway, I just wanted to go down that little path with you, because that was like such a unique day, you know?
Yeah, super fun, super strange. Always a good time playing in St. Louis.
Heck yeah, man. All right, well, let's go back in time a little bit. Tim, how did you get into like music, playing guitar, like maybe finding punk rock? What is that trajectory and story like for you?
Well, I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 11 years old, I guess, or 11 or 12. My dad played guitar, so he just gave me like a crappy Squier Stratocaster, and I started learning Blink-182 songs and stuff, because that was and The Offspring. That's what I was listening to back then.
Yeah.
And I kind of got into some like metal and industrial music, and then eventually just like went all in on punk rock music. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say like by the time I was 14 or 15 years old, I was listening to a whole lot of Bad Religion and NoFX, Propagandhi, and things like that, and you know, have been trying to learn how to play guitar since.
Absolutely, man. I hear that. I have a guitar that stares at me. It's hanging on a wall hanger above my desk where I'm sitting right now. And it's a blue Fender Mexican Stratocaster, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I don't deserve it in any way, shape, or form. It taunts me from its wall hanger about how bad I am and how good and nice it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, hey, what better time than the time of the plague to take it down off the wall and learn yourself a couple songs.
Absolutely. All right. So where does Propagandhi fall on this journey of musical fandom? Like, what did you hear first, and how did they enter your life?
Well, I mean, I was mostly steeped in like the Epithet type of punk rock. I still am a huge Bad Religion fan. They were like my first love in terms of punk rock. And, you know, I was developing something of a political consciousness, but I was young, you know, and so things like Anti-Flag's Underground Network and you know, Bad Religion's No Control and things were the albums that kind of gave me a blueprint for my like political leanings or whatever. In my high school band, we were called the Commies.
Nice.
I met Brian Van Proyen, who is actually the guitar player of Elway as well. We've been playing music together for 20 years or something almost. And he introduced me to Propagandhi. He gave me his CD copy of How to Clean Everything. And I was like, whoa, holy shit. Completely like earth-shattering lyrics. Whereas, you know, Anti-Flag, it was that was like the most forward representation of political sloganeering that I could find in punk music at the time. and it was very digestible. Yeah, there's a song straight up called "Fuck Police Brutality."
Yeah.
Of course, I'm on board. But I mean, songs like "Middle Finger Response" and "Hate, Myth, Muscle, Etiquette" on "How to Clean Everything" really stepped up the game, and so from there, I mean, by that time, Less Talk More Rock was also out, and so I expanded onto that record and wound up liking it more than "How to Clean Everything," to the point that I mean, early incarnation of Elway, when we were still called 10-4 Eleanor, we covered "Resisting Tyrannical Government" poorly.
Nice.
And yeah, so and then from there, I was like a lifelong fan of the band, and it just, to me, they get better with every record. And maybe it's because I just happen to be growing up and getting more and more scrupulous or attentive to detail in music the older I get. But yeah, they've been a constant. They're, if not my favorite band, certainly the best band.
That's so interesting. Well, and I know that your band Elway, I know that you all have done a little bit of touring with Propaganda as well. I'm curious if you have any any awesome stories from the road, or any stories of seeing Propaganda live throughout your life that have been super important to you, or anything like that jumps out about live experiences in any way, or just mingling with them at events or festivals or on tour, etc.
Well, I mean, I'll say this: they're all real nice. We got along real well with them. Joe and Chris bonded over hockey, as far as I remember. And but I will say this, and this is more important than any particular story from that tour. I'd say that it's fair to say that everyone in my band is at least somewhat jaded about playing punk rock music. I mean, we've been doing it for a long time, and it's real easy to lose interest, and really hard to get ourselves stoked in a St. Louis parking lot in 2011 kind of way.
Yeah.
But I will say that every damn show on that tour, I mean, we would finish playing, and then we would pack up all our shit and then watch Teenage Bottle Rocket play there on the tour as well. But then when Propaganda played, I was just in the pit, wearing out my voice, because I mean, they're the one band that I just, against my being jaded about playing punk music, it just doesn't stand a chance. I was too excited. Me and Garrett, the drummer of Elway, just throwing his ass around in the pit. It was so much fun. I mean, really a dream come true for us, because collectively, Propaganda is probably our favorite band, I would say.
Awesome. Well, I was talking to Ben Murray from Heart Sounds and Light This City a couple weeks back for the Duplicate Keys Acaro episode. And Heart Sounds did a short tour with Propaganda on the East Coast, where it was 4 shows. But Ben said, he's like, I would have done anything to make that tour happen. He's like, I would do absolutely anything to play with Propaganda. And he's like, it stands out to me as something that I will remember for the rest of my life, because that's how special it was. Is that kind of how you feel about touring with this band, being able to see them every single day?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not, I mean, they're a spectacle to behold, because everything that they do is so precise, and aside from that, it's just, I mean, they make every band that plays before them look like clowns, I mean, it is incredibly special. And also it was like going on tour with the band that calcified my political identity as a young, impressionable kid, and then helped me kind of flesh out those ideas and think more critically about issues throughout my adult life as well. And so, in addition to just being a ripping band, they're also an incredibly formative band. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a short tour, but it was one of the coolest things I ever got to do.
Well, that is fantastic. Do you, Tim, I've been thinking about this a lot doing this podcast lately, that all of the things that Propaganda was saying in the 90s, they only get more correct over time as we, careen from disaster to disaster as a human species. I feel like everything that I was hearing in the 90s from them is still so pertinent and only getting more relevant with time. Do you kind of feel like that as well? Do you feel like you're living in some kind of like, some kind of bubble where it's like, holy smokes, I knew all along?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly prescient. I think that that's because they're careful to be. Well, I mean, the later along in their discography you get, the more this is true. But they're very careful about the things that they say, and the songs say what they mean and mean what they say, and it's not flippant at all. It's literally very deliberate, and with that amount of attention to detail going into the lyrics of a song, I think you're bound to have longevity, and I think they've proven to. And unfortunately, I would love it actually if the world had evolved in such a way that rendered those old lyrics irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if I could listen to the state lottery and be like, what is this even about?
Yeah, this is out of date.
Yeah, they don't really date themselves the way that, songs about George W. Bush in 2003 did,
Mm-hmm.
Like NoFX's Idiot Son of an Asshole isn't getting a lot of spins these days for its relevance,
Right.
But Propaganda certainly does. And I think that that's a byproduct of how carefully they craft their songs.
Mm. Yeah, man, I can't agree more. Well, Tim, it's super awesome that you're on this show to talk about this, because the point of this show is to document the views of super fans and musicians and scholars and academics who this band has, impacted their lives in some way. And it's so awesome that you're here, because like you actually, you shot me a message one time a few weeks back and you're like, oh my God, I love the show. And we're like, holy smokes, this is great, because I like your band. And to hear from you was so fantastic. And whenever I was like chatting with you via email, you mentioned that you wanted to pick a song from the Failed States record to discuss. So before we get into the specific song, Lotus Gait, I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about what kind of resonance Failed States as an LP has for you as a fan. What does that record as a whole product kind of mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's important to think of Failed States for me, I think, in the context that the album that came before is Supporting Cast, which for those of us who are like lifelong fans of the band, and I'm sure that a lot of people that are only casual listeners of the band, is considered sort of the holy grail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just banger after banger. There's not a second of wasted time on that record. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And when Failed States first came out, I remember there being like a teaser that was just the beginning of Note to Self, like the quiet part of Note to Self. And then right when the guitar riff comes in, they like cut it out or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could not be more stoked for when that record came out.
Yeah.
Which actually, I think was this week, right? I mean, it was this week in 2012 that it came out. I don't know. I was looking at it earlier. It doesn't matter. But so upon first listen, though, I found the record to be a little bit cumbersome. And it didn't immediately strike me the way that Supporting Cast did, where I was immediately into the songs. And some of the stuff just seemed like odd to me. And so it was a real grower. But now I do think, though, that it is probably it's my second favorite Propaganda record, and largely due to Lotus Gait and Duplicate Key Zakaro, and also Cognitive Suicide. Oh my God, what a fucking track!
Oh my God.
The thing that I loved about it, I think, is that it took me longer and more listens to get into it, but there's so much more to appreciate about the record than I ever gave credence to when I first listened to it. And now I think I listen to it more than I listen to Supporting Cast, and that's like really saying something.
Dude, you know what's so crazy is that I am the exact same way with this record, because when Supporting Cast came out, I was absolutely floored. I was living in the UK, and I got it on CD, and I was blown away from Night Letters all the way through Last Will and Testament on Supporting Cast. I was just hooked beyond belief. And it was an easy record to absolutely adore immediately. Everything about it all the way through. But then Failed States came out, and it sounded so different, and the recording was so different, and the songs were so different, and it was such a massive departure that it was also a piece of work for me. Like, I had to try to really process what was happening. It wasn't the same way as Supporting Cast, which was immediately accessible. And to be perfectly frank with you, it took me seeing them live in St. Louis at the Firebird in like 2012 or 13 to really to see them perform Failed States almost in its totality. That's when it really clicked for me. I had to see it live, and then I was like, oh, now I get it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have the punk urgency that Supporting Cast does, but it's a way more patient and thought out record, I think. And I think the lyrics are better, and like that might be sacrilege to a lot of people. But I mean, I personally think that the 1-2 bang of Lotus Gate and Duplicate Kizakaro at the end of the album is the finest like 6 minutes of propaganda ever. Amazing.
Well, on that note, let's dive into Lotus Gate, because this is your chosen song. It's track 11 on 2012's Failed States. And to me, this is basically a perfect song, which is going to spoil my, rating that we do at the end of the episode. But this is an astonishing piece of music. I think that it's possibly overlooked in the catalog. I'm not really sure. I don't really hear people say Lotus Gate a whole lot on social media. But I'm curious if you can tell me why you chose this song whenever I pressed you to pick a specific song.
Right. Well, so, I mean, first of all, the intro to this song is fucking awesome.
Yep.
I mean, that it starts out with that extremely angular riff that dies immediately into a very subdued, quiet intro that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the song. I mean, it is sort of the motif, or like the coda for the rest of the song, the melody is. And when it kicks in, it is your classic propaganda, like double time type of beat. But the drums and guitar on this song are stellar. And beyond that, I think that it is, in terms of propaganda writing lyrics which are pertinent and relevant to the modern socio-political moment, this song nails it harder than they usually do. I mean, it's they almost always do with all their songs, but this song in particular really struck me. I mean, it's like a lot of propaganda songs where you have to sit and read the lyrics and go, what the fuck is being talked about here?
Yeah.
And realize that it makes lots of references, or lots of, sort of diffuse metaphorical references to things which require Googling or reading.
Yeah.
And this song has that in spades, and that's sort of what I love the most about the band.
Well, I've been listening to this song a lot today in, preparation for this. I listened to it while I was running. I listened to it while I was doing work email. I listened to it on vinyl in my home office where I'm sitting here right now talking to you. I listened to the Jason Livermore remix remaster. I listened to the original. So I've been all over this song today, and it has cut me. I'm not having a great day today, to be perfectly frank with you. I'm having sort of like a day like, why are we here? What is all of this? What is happening? Are things ever going to get better? So I'm having that kind of day today. And this song really is, kind of like a crutch for me today, almost in a way, I've been super nostalgic today. The opening lines, I have this recurring nightmare really stands out to me. He talks about his childhood memories, and I've been, having sort of a crappy day. And I've been thinking about a lot of these things, like some of my own recurring memories or dreams or nightmares, some of my own childhood memories that really stand out to me for, traumatic experiences. And I'm curious if you can talk about any specific lines from the lyrics that like really jump out and resonate to you in connection to like your own life.
Well, sure. I mean, so the opening of this song to me is sort of like a personal annotation on Chris's behalf about the overarching theme of the song, right? So he doesn't expand upon a flailing pigeon. He doesn't expand upon what it was that he saw that his dad tells him to look away from, right? The important part about this song is that the sort of fundamental human empathy that we all kind of share, where we can understand and recognize suffering or pain or happiness in somebody else, or in something else, if it's a non-human animal or if it's your fellow human, is dulled and obscured deliberately, not just by the systems of technological overbearance that we have in our culture, in our society, but also we do it to ourselves. And I think given the time that we're recording this, you can see that sort of thing, the sort of collective trauma suffered by watching the police officers in Kenosha, Wisconsin, shoot that man 7 times in the back and watch a white supremacist kill 2 people in the street and the police just let him go home. These are horrifying, traumatic experiences that everybody in this culture bears witness to, not just personally necessarily, but also as a collective trauma via our phones or via the news or television or radio or whatever. But that there's a structural system in place that we all sort of recede back to that pads us from actually acting on that trauma. You know what I mean? So to me, the meaning of this song is that we pacify ourselves with TV or the internet or and that it literally keeps our feet bound. I mean, that's what Lotus Gait refers to. Is the idea of Chinese foot binding, which the feminist critique of which is that it was designed to make it so that women couldn't go out and do things, so that they just tended to their domestic affairs and were relegated to that world and were not able to participate in the larger, maybe more important aspects of their society because they were forced into this sort of physical deformation because of the culture that they lived in. And I believe that the point of this song is that by becoming wrapped up in world affairs as they are presented to us on the television or on our phone, we are in effect binding our own feet and limiting our own ability to feel empathy for other humans or to act on that empathy and to make the world a better place because we're stuck.
Man, it's so true. And, Chris talks about this. This is kind of like almost like the precursor to Adventures in Zoocosis, where Chris talks about like living in his his comfortable air conditioned like container almost. And this kind of like alludes to why we are so comfortable in those containers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my God.
It's easy to be comfortable, if you think about, and this might be a bit tangential, feel free to edit it out.
Heck no, man. I'm going for it.
But I mean, the idea that everybody in the developed world, or whatever you'd like to call it, is walking around with a piece of technology in their pocket through which we can see a fisheye view of the world that's filtered through literally an algorithmic representation of the things that we want to be true, or the things that we believe to be true. And you don't necessarily have to have your viewpoint challenged. You don't need to be confronted with the things that are awful that are happening to other people, or the things that the things that are happening to other people across the world that you have a part in by consuming or by just existing in this country or any other. But rather that it's a projection of our like digital self, where we can literally cordon off the darker scenes. We can take our own personal traumas, or our own, or the things about the world that make us upset or make us sad, make us angry, and we can look at our phone, and there is a feed of information which is not necessarily designed to distract us from that, but that's what we use it for. So that we can project our digital ego out into the world and disconnect ourselves from the fundamental connection that binds all living things.
Man, that's so wild, because like if I think about like any app on my phone, like pick any of them, Washington Post, NPR, New York Times, like they're publishing content like absolutely at a rapid clip. Constantly these articles are coming out. So I sit there on my back patio, I open up my phone in the morning, I get my coffee, I go outside, I sit in my chair out in my back patio, open up New York Times app, read an article, become enraged. Go on to the next article, read that, become enraged. Go over to the Washington Post app, read that, and I get more enraged. And then I'm like, oh, what is this world coming to? Blah, blah, blah. And then when I come to out of my rage spiral, what I've realized is that, 120 minutes have passed and I'm sitting next to a cold cup of coffee, and I have done literally nothing to contribute to the betterment of society, but stew in my cycle of endless rage. You know that feeling?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's what the line "a Stockholm Syndrome fifth estate" oblately refers to. I mean, it's the fifth estate exists outside of the media, right? But rather it's like a underground or subterranean viewpoint that is outside of the media as we see it, right? And that's what social media is. It gives everybody their own little voice. And there is an entire sphere, like a marketplace of ideas that exists on social media that, in effect, allows us to have our own idea about what the world is, about what happens and what it means, and what opinion you should have about it. And I think that it's really easy, given the way that the internet works and how, algorithmic content filtering works, for you or I or anybody, an alt-right goon, to get online and look at things that only affirm the viewpoints which make you comfortable. And you can ignore, in so doing, all of the horrible things that have real effects on real human lives, and then trade it in for whatever, the endorphins that you get from refreshing your Facebook feed, or the endorphins you get from getting likes on a photo, or the endorphins you get from being pissed by reading MSNBC articles. But I'm not trying to say that in any way that my acknowledgement of this means that I'm above it. I don't think anybody is. And I also think that that's what this song is sort of about, where we do it to ourselves. We pacify ourselves, and even our rage, which mounts daily about the things that happen in this world as it is provided to us via online or digital content. I mean, it exists in such a way that we are able to consume it, get angry about it, but we're stuck in this Mobius strip type loop where we don't break out of it and get to the fundamental point of fact, which is that our human empathy is co-opted by our anger or our distraction.
Well, dude, and it's so crazy because this song is now 8 years old, as you mentioned, and it is only getting worse every single day. Can you imagine the year 2040 at the clip that we're going? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I shudder to think.
I agree. I completely. I'm on the same page with you there. I don't even know where to go with that. You know what I mean? I say those words, and I'm like, I I don't even know where to go with that because like all these things that you're saying, I'm caught in this loop, this endless loop of doing these things day after day and these addictions and compulsions that I have with this like device, and I am just as bad as anyone. And the thought of breaking out of it seems so unbelievably enticing and liberating, but like I also know that like I feel like a complete it's like content to marinate in the plasma glow. Do you know what I mean? Like I get sucked in and then 3 hours of my life that I'll never get back again just go by in a blink. And so to think about the year 2040 is I feel like holy smokes, I got to get to work on myself.
Yeah, I mean, we all do. This song, it does strike a chord that seems dystopian or a little hopeless. I mean, if you think about, if you were able to get all of the best dystopian science fiction writers in the same room
Mm-hmm.
in the 1950s or 60s when they were at their peak and say, all right, predict what the year 2020 will be like. There is no way that they would predict that we would all be carrying around a device which we use to actively pacify ourselves
Oh,
against this monstrous white supremacist capitalist system under which we are all living.
well, and we know it's wrong. And the song points out that it's wrong. Anything to dull the pain of a self-inflicted crippling Lotus Gait. So we are crippling ourselves. And I'm telling you, I'm sitting here, Tim, I'm sitting here telling you that I am hopelessly addicted to this thing which pacifies me on any given day, and it keeps me from doing things that are great and human and will make me come out and live the best version of myself to where I can, be on my deathbed someday being like, man, I did my best. Right now, I'm not doing my best. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but not doing the best by yourself, and no one's doing the best by the rest of the living beings that we share this planet with.
Mm.
And I mean, there's much that could be done that we have the resources for, that we have the ability to do, that we are effectively cut off at the knees, and not because of this totalitarian system which actively represses us. Given the opportunity, I think humans have proved that we will pacify ourselves because it's easier than actually confronting the things about this world which are horrifying or which are about which are unfortunate for yourself or for others. Hence the psychic police tape. You cordon off the darker scenes, but you can still stumble through it and relive them, right? And we are in effect ignoring those things deliberately. And then we can also know that we're ignoring them, which only compounds the guilt and fear and shame.
Man, and like I think Chris is also calling himself out in this song. We think of Chris Hanna like he's a very well-spoken, very thoughtful person, but I think that he has noticed himself being guilty of this as well. Like he writes conservative at heart, a conformist from the start. And I think he's probably talking about himself just as much as he's talking about all of us as well. Like we have all these huge ideas, but if all you do is scroll on Washington Post all day long, you're just doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we're talking over Zoom right now.
Yeah.
We're using fancy microphones. There are things about the modern world that we all take a sort of weird solace in.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that my life is rather comfortable and that I am extremely privileged in the place that I live with the job that I have, that it does seem at times like it's easier to conform and to accept, the confines of your enclosure than it is to feel all of the things that about this world which are uncomfortable or unfortunate for you to confront. You know,
Mm.
it's not exactly in line with you living a comfortable life to acknowledge that if you buy Coca-Cola, you're probably motherfucking somebody across the world.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so true. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Tim, let's talk about something maybe a little happier for a minute. So this song musically is super wild. Great drums, cool rack tom, awesome, like gentle and effective like China cymbal accents. Like there's bass runs all over the place, guitar licks, huge riffs. And I love having musicians on the show because they're often able to explain things in a musical manner that I can't quite verbalize due to my own personal musical mediocrity, which we talked about earlier. But I'm curious if you can tell me about your thoughts on the musical performance of Lotus Gait itself.
Yeah, man. There are two moments in particular in this song that I think fucking rip. And
Nice.
so the second verse, this is the "As for me, a filigree of psychic police tape." There's like a call and response between the lyrics and the guitar, and each response is different, and each one gets like a little bit more intricate, culminating with the but the wandering mind stumbles through it. There's like a da-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Oh man,
Yeah.
yes.
It sounds like an octave pedal. Maybe it is, or maybe it's two guitars doing like a harmony, but it's like a little tiny piece of like Thin Lizzy guitar playing in the middle of this fast thrash song. I can't get enough of that shit. It's fucking great. Like I'll let my hands off the steering wheel and air guitar that shit.
Yeah, you gotta.
You know, I could die. That's fine. I love it. And then the other part is the sort of refrain in the conservative at heart, conformist from the start part.
Yeah.
The drums are doing like sort of a breakdown. And then like the chorus is reprised, but a more quiet version of the chorus. And there's like this China cymbal thing that Jord does. That's like, and it's just so like delicious. I can't. I have no better way to describe it. I mean, the bass in sync with that kind of breakdowny drum beat is so mathy and fucking cool. You know, I mean, I think that you wouldn't be doing this podcast if you didn't know that the reason why Propaganda is such a special band is because they are so like everything is so intelligently conceived and deliberate, and they're bands that shred really hard, but no band like is more thoughtful in the way that they apply those skills. And this song's a great example of it.
I couldn't agree more. And like Jord is, he really does have a standout performance on this song. I thought about this whenever I was doing Tertium Non Datur episode as well, about Jord's drum performance throughout the entire thing and how it's just so intricate and so like almost gentle in a way, because he's got these like just these delicate accents all over the place. And this is another one where they're doing the conformist from the start, conservative at heart part. And Jord really just like leans into like a lot of really awesome stuff that just make it so special. I'm really glad that you and I have a couple of the favorite parts, because I also love that guitar back and forth where it's like talking to the vocals almost in a way. And that just harkens back to my admiration for this era of the band with David Gillis, the Beeve, playing guitar. I mean, what is it about like this era, this supporting cast failed states era with the Beeve, Chris, Jordan, Todd? Like, do you have any like special thoughts about these two albums almost as like a set together when the Beeve was with them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that what Beeve brought to the band is his background, as far as I know anyway, is in like instrumental like post rock, you know, that Giant Sons stuff that came out on G7, from which, by the way, I think that entire song, the Tertium Non Datur song, is Giant Sons song.
It is.
I think that he has a different perspective on playing aggressive music than Chris does, right? I mean, I don't know him or his background all that much, but it seems that he is as much in tune with shoegaze, and like using effects and making atmospheric kind of stuff. Then he's just as good at that stuff as he is at that like fast palm muting, like shreddy thrash metal type playing. And I think that it added a huge amount of depth to those songs. I think that Sulin's even better at it than he is, maybe.
Wow, nice.
I just think that at bottom, I think maybe Chris and Jordan and possibly Todd are like headbangers. You know what I mean?
For sure.
They're like metalheads that are too smart for their own good.
Yeah, they're today's empires, tomorrow's ashes, for sure.
Yeah, or Potemkin City Limits. Where,
Yeah.
I mean, that's I love all of those records, and so I'm not in any way trying to besmirch them, but I think that having a second guitar player with a different approach that involves maybe more atmospheric or melodic components adds an immense amount of depth to those songs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm really glad that we got to do a little bit of Sulin and Beeve, geek out for a second there, because I love them both so much, and their eras of the band are so special. And that's what makes this band so special, is that they have these really distinct eras. They have the Samson era. They have the classic Kowalski Trio era. They have the Beeve era. They have the Sulin era. And all four are so perfectly distinct that's what makes this band so interesting to me, is their complete evolution and their constant change while remaining the band that we love, but giving us something so fresh and so new every time. Like, I'm getting emotional just talking about it.
I feel you, man. I'm right there with you. I consider myself like a real student of this band that is just kneecapped by my inability to play or write music with anywhere near the complexity that they have. They're a special band.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. It's so much so that you could have a podcast where somebody literally geeks out about 25 lines of lyrics and 2.5 minutes of guitar.
So Keith and I cannot believe how we are able to take a song like, Bringer of Greater Things from Potemkin City Limits, a song which, people don't often talk about as like being like one of their standout tracks or anything, even though they perform it live and stuff like that. And, I know the band likes that song, but the rabbit hole of horrifying things that looking into the topic of that song led to, for me personally, like Keith and I were depressed for days. We just kept reading about, First Nations men being dropped off in the middle of a -40 Saskatoon winter night to freeze to death out in the middle of nowhere with the city lights gleaming in the distance. And I was like, a song freaking took me down this rabbit hole of absolute horrific things. And this is what this band does for me, is like, they show me so many horrifying things about the world that allow me to continue to challenge myself for years and years of my life. But they also have this this glimmer of hope through these things that, are anthemic and, catchy, and they make me happy at the same time, while they're also forcing me to face some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think that Lotus Gait coupled with Duplicate Keys Acaro is the best 1-2 punch of propaganda ever, because Duplicate Keys, I mean, you can get as scrupulous as you want talking about ayahuasca and talking about trip and face, but at bottom, the last line of that song is the operating principle of this universe is love.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of shit that I think this song, Lotus Gait, it skirts around the idea of, because what is missing about the way that the modern world allows us to pacify ourselves is that at bottom, the things which bind us together that allow us to make the world a better place, or could allow us to make the world a better place, is that we all acknowledge that the reason why we're here, so far as we can see, is to love and to help other people. And so as dark as Lotus Gait is, I think that for the discerning listener, or for those who would care to read further into the lyrics, that at bottom, the only reason why this song is so sad is because we know the truth.
Yep.
And that we put obstacles in our way to prevent us from reaching it.
Dang, you just blew my mind about the connection between these two songs and why they're sequenced the way they are. Wow. Okay, I'm kind of, going crazy here all of a sudden, because I feel like so much of the misery of the world is exactly what you said, and Lotus Gait nails it so completely, how we can live in cities of 1 million plus people and yet feel completely and utterly alone and depressed at the exact same time. But then he throws in this, almost like this instruction manual with duplicate keys Akaro about, like, you can see if you flip the world upside down what is possible. Whoa.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be about psychedelics necessarily, though it is. I mean,
yeah.
I just think that shifting your perspective to get closer to a sort of like understanding that about the planet that you live on, and the amount of time that you have on it, and the things that you're capable of doing, versus the terminal disappointment that is what we do.
Mm. Amazing. All
Yeah,
right.
you ain't the only nerd out there, man.
Oh my God. Well, Tim, say that you came across some young kids who were, interested in, quote unquote radical thinking about the world, and are, teenagers right now, and are, into music, but like they're envisioning a world for themselves when they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And they are well attuned in this generation right now, man, to the super messed up things that happen. I'm a high school teacher, so like I've heard many things in the last 15 years from young people about like what is happening. We're inheriting what now? Maybe give a an entry point to what you would do if you came across one of these kids, about showing them this band and helping them process some things. Like, what would you show people who are listening to this band for the first time?
I mean, probably supporting cast, right? I mean, that would probably be, that's a good entry point,
Mm-hmm.
I feel because I was younger and I was listening already to No Effects and other like Clown Shoes type fast skate punk music,
Yeah.
like How to Clean Everything was a good bridge between that and what Propaganda has become now.
Yeah.
But I think for now, I mean, there's something for everybody on that Propaganda record.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the title track in particular is a nice blueprint for what it's like to feel like who you are and your status as a human on this earth doesn't matter unless you're rich and powerful.
Mm.
And so, I mean, for willing ears and the people who want to listen to intelligently conceived, insurgent music, I think supporting cast is a nice entry point.
Awesome. Well, Tim, this has been I just looked at the clock and I was like, I've kept him for an hour. I mean, time just flies by when you're talking about this incredible band and what they mean and how they force us to look at the realities of the world and confront some really uncomfortable truths about ourselves. And to me, this song is almost about like how we almost waste our lives just consumed with anger and technology, and how we just let this spiral. I got to tell you, man, I'm super grateful to you for this conversation. I needed sort of like an outlet for this energy that's inside me tonight. And this was like a perfect way for me to kind of talk about some concerns that I have in a constructive manner for myself.
Well, fuck yeah, man. Listen to The Days You Hate Yourself next.
Awesome. Yes. All right. Well, Tim, from Elway, this is awesome. I hope people check out your band as well if they haven't, because you guys are on Red Scare, great records. You can mail order all your stuff from Toby Jeg, the wonderful Toby Jeg out there at Red Scare Industries. Tim, thank you so much for coming on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda and geeking out with Lotus Gait.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hot beats, but the shores of each of us.
So that was my chat with Tim from Elway, a fellow super fan of Propaganda, which is fantastic. We recorded that interview a little bit ago, so I really am appreciative to Tim for being so patient with me. Fortunately, we recorded a chat over what is basically a timeless song. So thanks to Tim for being a little patient on me while we were trying to get that interview out. So thanks, Tim, and we will hopefully have you back on the show. I know we have a couple more songs that you were interested in talking about.
Greg, since we already talked so much about lyrics and history, how about we address some music first today?
Yes, awesome. Well, I was doing some digging into the music for this episode, and last week on our People's History of the World episode, I didn't have a ton to say about the music, and I wanted to do music a little more justice on this particular episode. So I did a little tour of time signatures on this. I dug into my Sheet Happens Failed States book. You know, we start off in a 4/4 from the start of this tune all the way to the line about plasma glow, where it briefly then switches into 5/4, but then alternates between 5/4 and 4/4 until it begins switching between 6/4 and 4/4 between the lyrics "commune before like our dime store shrines." And then it switches between 3/4 and 2/4 between votive lives and splintered Lotus Gait. And then it basically varies through those for the remainder of the song and ends on 3/4. So if you need more specifics on the time signatures of this performance, I can't recommend checking out those Sheet Happens books enough. They're so unbelievably cool, and it is rad as hell to watch the bars of music go by as the music is like blasting into my headphones. I love following what is happening on those music books as I'm listening to the songs like full blast in my studio headphones, because I've got these great new headphones and they sound amazing. So I'm hearing these tiny little things that are pointed out within the book, and I just loved following those time signature changes throughout the song. So anyway, huge recommendations. Check out Sheet Happens. Their work is so cool that even a dummy like me can follow along.
I've actually gotten more use out of my tab book from Failed States just for the show, trying to follow along than playing along, since I know I can't.
Yeah. Do you have a particular instrument that you wanted to start on?
Well, I think the guitars that stands out to me first, and I'm going to blend a couple things together, Greg, because I think they're just connected so well. And I think just with the intro, doesn't really hint at what lies in store ahead for the listeners. I mean, they're like those really bright opening power chords backed by the cymbals, which fade out and then they fade back in and then blend into that main guitar riff, which repeats throughout the song. It's played a little differently. The open notes in that opening part, I think, really creates this sense of unease, not exactly dread, but there's maybe discomfort, especially with different sound effects that coincide with flailing pigeon. It almost sounds like a whisper is played backwards. There's a couple eerie sound effects, and then that is replaced by the humming feedback that rises. So I think right away, the guitars are super interesting.
All I got to say on a song like this is thank goodness for two guitars and two minds going into the guitars. So you have Chris's mind and Beeve's mind. So it's not Chris playing over himself. It's, you know, Chris and Beeve working together with two minds instead of one on the guitars, which I love. And the guitars in the beginning of this song are so cool. That opening riff, when it gets quiet under his soft, I have this recurring nightmare. It's so simple. And I was looking at the tab for it. It's not easy because you have to like be really good at your up down picking with your pick hand to go between those two strings, but you have to go up down. It's not just downstrokes. But he's going back and forth on the D and G strings with the D string open, and it's so beautiful. But then B comes in with those sound swells under to the freezing pavement, and then he does it throughout the rest of the quiet intro. And I love how consistent Chris is on those little picks that he does, while Beeve swells and hits those hard notes with Todd, the dun dun dun. So I love the way that they constructed that together. There's so many little nuances in the song as well with guitar. So then when we get into the main song, we have these high runs on the neck just these tiny little moments. Like if I keep thinking about what Ben Murray said back on our Duplicate Keys episode about how Propaganda hits these tiny little half bar sections that then they will like do for like a full bar, and then they'll do it for a half bar later.
Mhm.
And I love the high runs that Chris and Beeve do together under Home Entertainment Prisons We. So if you listen to the guitars on that, they go from the really chuggy riffs on the low notes, and then they go really way up high. And it gives those words flair when sung. So when they go super up high on Home Entertainment Prisons We, it's that the guitars go way up high. And they do that later again under Courage Never Came, which is like a little revisit that Propaganda throws in on so many of these mid-era songs where they have this tiny thing that happens at a few points in the song to keep the discerning ear picking up on these little pieces that a lot of bands wouldn't throw in. You know what I mean?
Greg, I think you're spot on with the observation about what the Beeve added to this. And Chris mentions this on his podcast about how he would come with an idea formed for a track, and, you know, the Beeve would learn it, and then he would add all of these different parts to it. And I think this is clearly a song where that is clear. And, you know, back to the beginning where it says, have this childhood memory, and it kicks in, like how in sync the vocal and guitar melodies are. But it also has a little bit of a late Propaganda stamp on it, like late era stamp, because Chris's vocals and the melodies are kind of slightly offset. So if I sing along, I always end up coming in late after Chris always does. And that's probably just because I don't understand time signatures. I don't understand really the pacing here, but I think it just makes it a little bit more complex, which really makes it more unique. Also, the lead guitar melodies are so much more apparent on the remastered version. I've listened to mostly just the original version because it's what I've had pretty much until this year. But listening to the remastered version, especially right before Chris sings like Hapless Citizens, that riff where he's playing and it changes and it moves up a little higher onto the neck, I didn't even notice that previously. And there are a few other parts to where, like you said, those nuances I hadn't really noticed. But what really stands out as a whole is how well everything is connected in Lotus Gait. I mean, the power chords that bridge what is the verse, I guess, to what is maybe considered a chorus, the drum fill transitions, like nothing's really in excess. Everything fits together. And I love how that main riff is transformed from that beautiful, slightly plodding, eerie sound in the beginning with all of those open notes to like a powerful banging riff when he starts singing New Post-Traumatic Stress Worldwide Disorder, that part. And the chorus has also those piercing guitar chords that make me think of more like supporting cast with just unique phrasing. Following along with my tab book, it reminds me some of the complexity of songs like Tertium, but maybe just a bit slower. And then there's really nothing to suggest later that there would be this mellowing out in the song around the 2-minute 20-second mark.
Yeah.
Where he sings from the plasma glow of the home entertainment, like that part where it kind of comes to a stop. I think this is where Jord and Todd stand out. Right before Chris sings again, a staggering Lotus Gait, there's that really awesome bass run, and the drum fills there are so lively and smooth. It's really just incredible.
You know, and I love how the song is like segmented and the guitars are largely together on the first half of the song. Like I feel like they're doing really similar things in the first half. And then I see that there's a guitar transition as being, as for me, the filigree of Psychic Police Tape sends Beeve down another guitar path. Like Beeve goes off on a totally different trajectory after the Psychic Police Tape part. Chris keeps on the riffs, and Beeve gets that atmosphere going on the high E, B, and G, and he accents those notes so masterfully and delicately. And, you know, that little guitar transition after, but the wandering mind stumbles through it, is so cool because Beeve is way up high and Chris is hitting more middle range notes, but then Chris throws in these little string bends on staggering Lotus.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, 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 wow. And it gives me all the feels, man. I absolutely love it when Chris throws that in. It's just so fantastic how there's so much going on in this tune, on guitar especially.
I was really spending a lot of time thinking today, are there bigger bends on a propaganda song? I couldn't think of it.
I don't know. Maybe, I mean, Purina Hall of Fame, maybe. I'm not really sure.
Sure. Soloing, yeah.
But like everything is on Purina Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
So
right.
everything is there. So, something really interesting to me that I was thinking about today about the bass on Failed States
Hmm.
is that it doesn't sound like the bass really on any other propaganda record. I think it has a really unique tone that John Paul Peters captured on this record with Todd. It's got this grumble to it, but it's also totally clear and crisp. And I don't really know if it has anything to do with the model of bass that Todd used. I know Todd used to use Ernie Ball Stingray basses, but when I saw Todd on the Failed States tour at the Firebird in St. Louis in like 2012 or 13, he was using a different bass that I'd never seen him use before. So I went on Twitter today and I was like, hey, everybody, what is this bass? And I posted a picture of Todd with the bass that I saw him use starting on the Failed States tour. And I got several responses. David from Giant Sons posted, a longtime listener, Derek Fulmer posted, and then another response on Twitter from a listener named Andrew helped me clarify some bass information. So thanks to David from Giant Sons and Andrew from Rig Rundown, and Andrew for that Rig Rundown video link, because I had forgotten totally about that. But it looks like Todd switched over to an Ibanez SR 1500 bass on this record. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the differences in tone, because Todd's bass really, it shines on this record. The way that JP and the band capture drums, which is like, there's no drum sampling over the top of a drum set or anything like that. It's just a drum set. This record sounded a ton different than if you listen to like this record sound compared to Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, where there's tons of drum editing. And I think there's like drum samples. I'm not really sure if the sounds were replaced in drum editing. This record sounds so real. The bass on this record sounds completely unique. And I think that Todd really shines on that slow part that you mentioned that begins at about 220.
Yeah.
Listen to his little run under two like dime store shrines under that lyric.
Right.
So great, man. So great. The bass line from conservative at heart, conformist from the start, through the Stockholm Syndrome Fifth Estate lyric really lets those guitars breathe and allows the bass to really shine through. Like, I love that section because the guitars, which are so prominent in every other part of the song, really dial back. It's a lot more atmospheric on the guitar, and then the bass really comes through on those leads. So I just love that about it.
And what did you notice as a drummer, Greg, that my non-drumming ears wouldn't pick out?
I love Jord toms, man. I just love his toms. His fills under before like dime store shrines. Oh, I love that part because he's got this like ba-da-da-ba, ba-da-da-ba, where he's got this snare rack tom fill into those China hits. Into are these but votive lies. I can't stop singing. I'm just singing like every 30 seconds on this episode, I feel like. But I'm a huge appreciator of Jord's tom work and his China cymbal. I think my favorite drum part is underneath "Prize open wide your eyes and shines a painful light." I keep singing. Because Jord could have just kept going on that part and didn't. Like, he could have just kept that fast drum beat going like in the rest of the song, but he really switches it up under that "Prize open wide your eyes." It's well written and it breaks up a possibly monotonous fast beat, and it really just goes to reinforce what JP said on our Negredo episode about the way Jord thinks about writing his drum parts, because I just love the way this song has a lot of flair on a fast song that makes it unique for drumming as well. So there's also a little bit more that I found on vocal delivery that I was thinking about.
Okay, cool.
I've seen the band play this live before. I couldn't help but think that the opening vocal part, "I have this recurring nightmare," I can't help but think that that is such a difficult thing to have come across live. If you think about a raucous punk or metal show,
Yeah.
it's really hard to pull off quiet stuff. in a loud, noisy room where people are going nuts. So you have this arguably one of the most delicate parts of a propaganda song is in the very beginning of Lotus Gait. I couldn't help but think that, like, wow, that's such a delicately sung part. Every concert I ever go to, people are talking over the band, or they're trying to talk over the band, because a lot of people go to concerts not to actually watch music, interestingly, which, I have very, very specific feelings about. But I watched a ton of YouTube videos on this song today. And hands down, my favorite video performance of this song is at Oakland Metro Opera House on February 21st, 2014. And Beeve totally rocks the hell out of those backing vocals, man. Beeve was spot on. But the quiet vocals come across so amazingly well on the record because, Chris is singing into a super sensitive studio microphone and not a microphone in a large concert hall. Like, those studio microphones are so sensitive that you barely need to sing a lot of the time, and it's crystal clear. Like, a studio microphone will oftentimes, if there's somebody breaks a glass 2 floors below you, it'll pick up on those studio mics. So that comes across really well on the record. But I feel like when Chris sings this song live, he almost has to oversing that quiet part because there's people in the room that are not paying attention, and 100 people in a crowd to be talking. As much as I miss going to shows, I don't really miss people who go to shows that don't actually want to see music right now. But my favorite part of the vocal delivery on this song is hands down the intro. The quiet croon of this song's intro stands out to me so much in Propaganda's catalog. I don't know if I've ever heard Chris sing like that on any other song. Nothing springs to mind today. It's like when there is a room of like rowdy elementary school kids and the teacher gets quieter instead of louder, and there's like a hush that settles over the room. You know what I mean? So it's like a, hey children, listen to me. You know what I mean? So you instead of yelling and going over the kids and escalating the rowdiness in the room, you bring it way down and you're like, all right, children, time to learn.
That's one of the tools in my toolbox. I know that one.
Yeah. Chris throws in this super quiet lyric, and all of a sudden, as a listener who's been a fan of Propaganda for a long time, I'm like, whoa, I want to hear what he's saying now. He's not like yelling at me right away. So I love the way it starts.
The only thing that comes to mind is maybe the opening of Comply Resist, but even this feels different for sure.
Well, I think that we should get a little bit into the lyrics now. What do you think about that, since we ended on vocal delivery for our musical section?
Yeah, Greg, let's talk about the lyrics.
All right, so where do you want to start?
How about that very first line, which you sang for us? I have this recurring nightmare.
I have this recurring nightmare.
We're going to be able to make this song with Greg's vocals on this episode.
I don't know why. I'm in a great mood. I can't help it right now. I just want to sing, I have this recurring nightmare. Anyway, go ahead. So tell me what you think about this opening line.
It's such an incredible, vivid detail. And though I don't doubt that it's either a real dream that Chris had, it also fits in, I think, with the other metaphors used in the song, which we'll get to, but it reminds me of a few things. I remember seeing a baby robin flapping in the river just off the seawall at my family's cottage that my family had when I grew up. And I stood watching it, and I watched it struggle to keep afloat, but I was paralyzed. I failed to reach down and pick it up, maybe unsure of what I would do with a baby robin. If I saved it, perhaps, I don't know, but I just watched. And of course, that inaction left me upset at myself and kind of ate me up for quite a while afterwards. So that detail stands out right away. And then related to that, I mean, my reoccurring nightmare, which isn't so much anything that would seem dangerous or a threat, but I have this dream, aside from the one where I realize that I'm in college and I've not attended class all semester, and then I get to class and then it's finals and I've not been there. I have that dream still all the time. But my most unique reoccurring dream, I have no joke, every 2 weeks or so, I'm at my family's cottage that I mentioned, which my dad sold. It was in my family since the late 60s. He sold it to our next door neighbors who tore it down so they could have more land. It was on the Tippecanoe River in Buffalo, Indiana, just about 90 miles north of Indianapolis for reference. And it was hands down my favorite place on earth. And even now, I don't feel sad. I feel physical pain when I think about losing it. Like, I spent so much time there with my family growing up, different time. You know, there wasn't a TV, there was no air conditioning, there was the buzz of insects, there was the flow of the river in the morning, occasionally a John boat early in the morning of someone going out and fishing. That place brought me so much joy and calm. And I spent a lot of time there by myself in college. I'd drive up from Bloomington for a week to say for a week or a weekend. I'd ride my bike in the countryside. I'd take the pontoon out for a ride. So my dream is that I'm at my cottage and it hasn't been torn down yet. And I know I'm not supposed to be there. I'm inside it. I'm trying to find some way to convince the neighbors next door not to tear it down. I have like this renewed hope, like, wait, it isn't too late. It's still here and I can have it back again. I never actually talked to anyone. I'm never caught trespassing, even though I know I'm not supposed to be there. And I always wake up before anything happens, but it takes me a while each time to realize that, in fact, it is still gone and it was demolished and I can't go there anymore. And I had that dream for probably 2 or 3 years. And then I told my dad, and my dad has the same exact dream.
Oh my God. How does he feel about it now?
He said it's the biggest regret of his life, selling it.
Was it in good shape when you guys sold it?
I mean, it was like an old railroad cabin. So it was close to 100 years old. It was fine. You know, you'd have to clean up. There'd be insects and animal droppings from winter, and you'd have to like defumigate it and
Yeah.
just, you know, air it out or whatever. But it was fine. But it needed work. And my dad since moved to Georgia. Probably I wouldn't have been able to manage and maintain it on my own. But still, it was like just a hard loss because it was super special. It was in our family, and it was just unique to be able to go somewhere and just be by the water and just enjoy the fresh central Indiana air, which doesn't sound very pleasing. But if you live in Northwest Indiana near all the steel mills and refineries, it's actually quite a bit different.
Man, and you know what's so crazy about that story is that I have none of my childhood homes. First of all my grandparents have passed, so I can't go to my grandparents' house or my other grandparents' house. And when I was 19, my parents sold my childhood home and moved to a different house. And my parents also had a lake cottage in the 1990s at Lake of the Ozarks. And they sold that, I think, when I was living abroad. And so none of the houses, none of the physical structures that I associate with childhood have I been to in years at this point.
Hard. Yeah.
And I've spent more of my life now not living in my childhood home in Fenton, Missouri, than I did living in it, which is utterly surreal to me to think about. I have a recurring nightmare as well. It's almost too freaking terrifying to say out loud. And every time I have it, I wake up like sheathed in sweat and terror. But Chris was brave here on this song, talking about his recurring nightmare and his memory with his dad. So I will be brave as well. My daughter has been learning to swim for the last year or so. She takes lessons. But whenever we go places like Lake Erie, south of Buffalo, there are great beaches here. Shockingly, we have beaches in Buffalo. So if you come in the summertime, we'll go hang at the beach. But we have these beaches here. She's got friends with pools. And whenever we go swimming, I watch like a hawk. And I put her in a life jacket and like, you know, floaties and the whole thing. Because my recurring nightmare is being at a lake with her and running from the shore down a dock, watching her go into the lake, reaching her arms up, and I reach down and she just vanishes in the water, and I'm like clawing my arms through the water, and she like vanishes in the dark, mucky water of a lake. I can't even go into it beyond that because it's too scary, and it makes me shoot awake twice a
Yeah.
month. So that's parenthood for me, is waking up from this horrendous recurring dream that
Mm.
happens to me once or twice a month sometimes. And there's no sleeping after something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awful.
I have a childhood memory, the
Mm.
next lyric I want to talk about, of my old man screaming from the driver's seat to turn away from an unfolding horror, but he could not undo what I had seen. And I know that when I was a kid, my dad saw a motorcycle accident on his way home from work. I know that he saw somebody die in a motorcycle accident on 44, which is a highway that runs through St. Louis, Missouri, and the surrounding suburbs. I know he saw that. I wasn't there, but I know it really messed him up for a while. But I have a few childhood memories involving my dad yelling as well at me in the back seat. I was thinking about my life now. Right now, there's no commuting anywhere for me. You know, I wake up and my desk is 3 feet from my bed. It's like a pathetic existence. But, you know, I'm working remotely. I barely have to hurry my daughter anywhere.
Sure.
And, you know, I'm grateful about our lack of rushing around in the morning for one reason. One of my most vivid memories of being a kid or being in my dad's Ford Bronco hauling ass to Adventure Club at 6:30 in the morning, 5 days a week. Getting ready for school in the morning when you're a kid is a traumatic event. And he'd be yelling, "We gotta go." And we had these little back roads behind my neighborhood that led to the highway. So he'd be flooring it on these little back roads with these big curves in this humongous Ford Bronco that didn't have carpeting. And he's a hauling butt, man. So he's hammering the stick shift. He's grouchy. He's got like, you know, I remember things like in his cup holder, like lip balm and his coffee mug and things like that. And this isn't a dig at him at all. Like, we all know how hard it is to get places on time, and rushing around at 6 a.m. on a dark winter morning only to be stressed about dropping off your kid at Adventure Club, which then means you then have to get on the highway and fight morning rush hour traffic into a city center where parking is horrible, only to get to one's desk or cubicle, and you're totally flustered and you've been like fighting traffic the whole way. And then you have to center yourself in order to be productive at your job. And like, it's insane, this society that we've created for ourselves with these like super commutes and like forcing people into these situations. It's the antithesis of happiness. And it's one of my most enduring childhood memories is getting yelled at in the morning, which connects to the next line: 2 more hapless citizens of the new post-traumatic stress worldwide disorder. And to me, that connects a lot to fighting traffic every morning, dropping off your kids at an ungodly hour in the morning, sitting in traffic, trying to be productive at work, fighting traffic all the way back, picking up your kid like late in the afternoon from Adventure Club again at like 5:30 or 6 in the afternoon. And that's your life. For years, you wake up your kid in the morning and they're grouchy. And then you fight to get them back home. You fight to get dinner on the table. And then it's like, well, go to bed because it's 8:30. And I just think about that as post-traumatic stress worldwide disorder for especially my life. You know, and I think that post-COVID, there's going to be a major shift in the way human beings produce work. The world isn't just going to like snap back to being exactly the way it was. But it also makes me think about something else. Being human is very traumatic, that we have these like therapeutic avoidances, which have been handed to us like on a plate by tech companies who suck us down algorithmic rabbit holes and perpetuate our own misery while we are painfully aware of said misery, but totally consumed in algorithms. So like, we have this pain of being human that we want to avoid, but the ways in which we avoid our pain are addictive and perpetuate social division, which are fueling a full-blown coup attempt of our government before our very eyes, like literally today. You know, it's truly stunning stuff, and it all stems from tribalistic pain and suffering and disillusionment on the personal level. And a lot of it is due to the certainty and knowing that the people who run our lives don't care about us at all. It's just got me thinking so much about this, what Chris calls this too this post-traumatic stress worldwide disorder and how it's just hammering all of us so hard right now.
There are a lot of different lessons in the song, Greg, and I really think the attempt mentioned in the first lyrics that you read to shield others, whether it's like children or anyone else, from the traumas of the world, like a car accident, but then not actually talking about it, treating it as though it never happened, is perhaps even worse. And that's my big takeaway, I think, from the opening. And this reminds me not so much of a childhood memory, but a few years ago, coming back from a field trip to the Field Museum in Chicago with my students. So our line of 4 buses were stuck in traffic at an idling speed coming home in rush hour. And we came to an accident in the other lane, and there was a limp body hanging out of a convertible, blood everywhere. This car had been smashed by a semi. And given the height of the bus and the vantage point of the school bus, there was no way to hide that scene from my students. So all I could try to do was, when I got back to my classroom, to check in with them. And I don't think that necessarily did any good, but I couldn't really leave it untouched. And that makes me think about how many traumatic things individuals experience and possibly experience together, but it just goes unsaid.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't know if my dad ever dealt with seeing a person crash a motorcycle to their death. Like, I have no idea. We literally never spoke of it again, just like the song says. And I think that we have this tendency to think that it's the strong reaction to not deal with these things. And I am very much creeping into middle age right now, and I am realizing all the ways that I have run from many problems, and they're slapping me in the face every single given day. So, this is giving me a lot to think about as far as how to deal with problems. But a lyric that touches on that is how we don't deal with it. So the lyric is, content to marinate in the plasma glow of the home entertainment prisons we commune before, like dime store shrines, are these but votive lives. So votive is defined as the consecration or fulfillment of a vow. So many of us declare that we want to live lives of purpose and dedication to a life's work. But dude, I have struggled to keep that going this past year. I'm actually amazed that I managed to write a new course for my teaching job. We've managed to somehow miraculously do this podcast more than 30 times. I have no idea how. I'm doing my other podcast. I'm teaching my classes. I'm getting my kid to her swim lesson and through her virtual schooling. I have lost countless hours down the distractions of my iPhone. So I'm doing these productive things, but man, am I struggling. And that plasma glow is so good and so soothing. And I am struggling, man. I think I scrolled on my phone for half the morning today while I drank my coffee. You know what I mean? I make my coffee and then I go to this like love seat in my living room and I just plop down in my pajama pants with my fresh coffee and I just scroll away, man. And I'm thinking to myself as I hear this lyric, is this a life of purpose, achievement to the best of my ability? Definitely not. And I have to say, like, the exhaustion of the nation right now, our need to homeschool our children while we're also trying not to get fired from our own jobs, probably living in overly messy houses that we look at and we think, I should clean that right now. But then we don't clean that right now. It's like the utterly perfect recipe for a government coup. The normal people are so tired and so exhausted that if the systems of governance that run the country were going to fall, this is the time. Tim from Elway talked a ton about all these horrible things happening. Each day after the election only seems to get worse Like the other day, 100 members of the House of Representatives signed an open letter supporting to allow a single state to overturn other states' election results, all while pushing for a pardon because the Attorney General of Texas is probably a criminal. You know, we're already seeing some of those people who signed that amicus brief the other day trying to call for unity after supporting a move to undo the peaceful transition of power. And now dudes in DC are saying that the incoming president will be removed one way or the other. So while normal Americans who aren't political extremists are just trying to literally get through each day without committing suicide, actual extremists are only getting more intense because they realize the whole country is exhausted. They're getting more extreme. They are locking and loading. And while the rest of us are fighting through our Groundhog Day depression, taking for granted that the country we knew before the pandemic can exist again, it's freaky as hell, man. I feel like while I'm like reading the coronavirus subreddit or looking at Washington Post for the 5,000th time, you know, there's like actual coups taking place and it is freaking me out and I have no energy whatsoever.
Greg, I didn't think about really connecting it so much to current events, but I think, as you said, the timelessness of this song can really fit in a number of ways. And you already shared a lot of information about foot binding in the intro, the self-imposed constrictions people force on themselves and others that disabled them. So in China, the Lotus Gait was dainty and calculated walks from bound feet. But I see this part, our global Lotus Gait, is much like the metaphor in The Adventures of Zoochosis. Our self-administered pacifiers, popular culture, consumerism, telephones, social media, smartphones, all the screens that we stare at endlessly with empty eyes and minds. I mean, I imagine Chris's family got home from that car ride and perhaps his folks immediately just turned on the TV, because that's how I remember so many unnerving moments in my own childhood.
Dude, totally.
The fear and doubt and the pain and confusion were just hushed. And the newest episode of Baywatch was turned on. We never actually worked through whatever we saw or we experienced. So like the tangled, twisted truss isn't the lotus shoe for us. It's our culture and identity that has been replaced with entertainment and the furtive promise for something better, even if it's only on a screen, vicariously through the lives that we watch rather than actually live ourselves. And it reminds me of kind of what I said on the Woe Is Me episode, like, what's my therapy? How do I actually make sense of things? And do I? What have the consequences of hearing like, buck up, kid, or everything's going to be okay my whole life? What are the consequences of that? And again, like Zoochosis and the enrichment programs implemented to extend our captive lifespans, it's like we root for and defend our keepers, those who have confined us. So to drive that metaphor home even further, Chris sings a Stockholm Syndrome fifth estate. So the four estates are, the first is the executive branch of a government, like the president. The second would be the legislative branch, any part of government that makes laws, like Congress. Then the third would be the judicial branch, so like the Supreme Courts and federal courts. The fourth would be mass media. And then the fifth estate would be journalists, pundits, bloggers, and non-mainstream media, which essentially allows anyone to have a powerful voice in shaping policy and public opinion, and coupling that with Stockholm Syndrome. Now, I'm sure most of the listeners are familiar with that, which describes incidents where hostages develop feelings for and defend their captors. But I read an article from the New Yorker called The Bank Drama, and there are just so many poignant details to share. So just to give some background story on the origin of that term. So in 1973, an escaped convict, Jan Erik Olsson, robbed a bank in Stockholm, Sweden. He wounded a police officer who responded to a silent alarm. Then he took 4 bank employees hostage. All of his demands were met, which included like the police bringing him a Ford Mustang, more than $700,000, and a fellow convict, but they refused to let him leave with the hostages. So as they were confined to a bank vault, a connection formed between the gunman and the hostages. And one hostage recalled being given a wool jacket when she was cold, And another was allowed to call her family. When she couldn't get through, he said, go ahead, try again, don't give up. One woman was overcome with claustrophobia. The robber put a length of rope about 30 feet around her neck and let her walk around for a while. And the woman said, quote, I couldn't go far, and I was on a leash that he held, but I felt free. I remember thinking he was very kind to allow me to leave the vault. 2 hostages were within plain sight of the police during this bank robbery when they were allowed to use the bathroom. And not only did they not escape, they were called actually feeling like traitors for telling the police how many hostages there were in the vault. So the hostages by the second day were on first name basis with the captor, and they began to fear the police more than him, even showing hostility toward the police commissioner who was allowed to enter the bank. And ultimately, police fired tear gas into the vault. They stormed it, and the gunmen surrendered, though the hostages refused to come out first, believing that the captor would have been killed if they left him behind. And they were seen kissing and embracing and holding hands in the bank vault, begging police not to injure him.
Oh my God.
So some of the hostages visited this bank robber after he was sent back to prison. He was released in 1980, and he married one of the women who sent him admiring letters while he was in prison. So the term Stockholm Syndrome was coined just in the months after to explain this irrational and extreme feeling that some captives feel for their captors. And the very next time it was used is in the next year. Patty Hearst, who's the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, who was made famous by Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, she developed sympathy for her captors when she was abducted by a leftist militant group, the Symbionese Liberation Army, who demanded food for impoverished people in Southern California. But Hearst was videotaped willingly participating in bank robberies, and she later declared that she had joined this militant group. So I think this connection altogether, it says that we defend and we apologize for the systems that hold us captive. And we've swapped out the ability to meaningfully communicate with each other, with people we no longer even know how to talk to. And we gather around the warm glow of a flat screen. I mean, 10 years, it would be like that on the TV. And now it's even more isolated. We could just gather around the glow of our solitary screen in just the form of our smartphones in our hands.
We're definitely not progressing in that field at all. But, talking about all that Patty Hearst stuff and the police stuff. That reminds me of another lyric in the song. It says, "As for me, a filigree of psychic police tape tends to cordon off the darker scenes." What do you think about that line?
Oh man, I was blown away. Sami Zayn recited that line when I interviewed him about psychosis last summer, and since then it's really stood out to me. And if you've listened to Chris's episode on duplicate keys of Caro, then like me, you've probably already convinced that he should write books. I mean,
Yes.
This line alone does that same job in that hour-and-a-half episode, which clearly demonstrates that he's writing with as much heart and skill and sense of purpose when he puts pen to paper. And I think we just don't allow ourselves to work through, to learn from, to process, and to move on from the traumatizing things that we've seen. I mean, we sweep it under the rug because it's not okay to ask questions, or for maybe you and me, Greg, it's not manly to worry about certain things, or some things just aren't talked about.
Yeah, the next line, I think, in this song, the next one is, the wandering mind stumbles through it and relives them all eventually. So there's almost like this discovery of repressed memories almost happening. And then he goes on to say, pries open wide your eyes and shines a painful light on the guilt, the fear, the shame, the courage that never came from the plasma glow of the home entertainment prisons that we cling to like dime store shrines. So I already kind of talked about that line, but did you have any other thoughts on that one? Because I know that's there's a lot going on there.
I connect that back to Chris's episode on duplicate keys, where he talks about the possibility of repressed memories of his own and his own skepticism with that. So I had never really thought about it. And reading the lyrics this week and thinking back to his Patreon episode, I thought to do a little bit more reading about it. And it's apparently a pretty controversial concept in the field of psychology. So I read an article from Harvard Magazine by Ashley Pettis, who asks if it's a cultural symptom. She calls back to several publicized court cases regarding childhood abuse based on recovered memories in the 1980s, with a number of the plaintiffs later retracting accusations. So a professor at Harvard led a study to determine if repressed memories are an innate human trait or if they're simply a cultural phenomena. And he argued that if repressed memories are innate, meaning that it's something the brain will naturally do, then evidence of such would appear throughout history in written work, just like there's evidence in writing throughout history of depression, anxiety, dementia, hallucinations. So the study only found just a few examples from the 19th century, like in Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, and in another work by Rudyard Kipling, but nothing before that. So they set a reward for $1,000 if someone can find an example of dissociative amnesia in any written record, fiction or nonfiction, before 1800. And they ultimately ruled that none of the submissions met the criteria for what they constitute a repressed memory. So therefore, the study argued that the lack of evidence before the 1800s signifies that it's not a neurological function, but a culture-bound syndrome rooted in the 19th century. And this researcher, Harrison Pope, states, clearly the rise of Romanticism at the end of the Enlightenment created fertile soil for the idea that the mind could expunge a trauma from consciousness. And then he went on to say that there were other pseudo-neurological symptoms, such as like the female swoon, which emerged during the era of Romanticism but faded relatively quickly, and that he suspected that two specific major factors helped solidify this idea of repressed memory in the 20th century's imagination. The first would be psychoanalysis with its theories of like the unconscious and, of course, Hollywood. And he stated that film is a perfect medium for the idea of a repressed memory. Think of the flashback in which a whole childhood trauma could be revealed.
Oh, man. I think that Tim and I talked about the line conservative at heart, a conformist from the start. And so Tim and I did so much lyrical breakdown. So I was just dying to know what you were thinking about as you were listening to the song, because you weren't on that call with Tim where we went so wild in that chat. But what did you think about this line, conservative at heart, conformist from the start? Because I love it.
Chris makes mention on his podcast really frequently that he grew up conservative. He refers to himself more or less as a nationalist in his younger years. Again, it kind of reminds me of something that I like in Zoochosis, where he says, though I suspect that if I slink back to my enclosure, safe and warm and adequately lit. So to me, I think he does this because of so many years spent on the soapbox trying to expose people to struggles and issues, just certain, convinced that they'd take action and they'd care if they just knew, but perhaps that he regrets now some of the time that he spent proselytizing the audiences. And now he doesn't necessarily exonerate himself when he criticizes what I think like Chris Hedges would call an image-based culture in his book, The Empire of Illusion. Chris puts himself right in the center of the lyrics to remind the listener in a way, I'm no better.
Yeah. And I love the presence of what is basically a chorus in this song where he says, it's a strangled, twisted truss that shores up each of us. So anything to dull the pain of a self-inflicted, crippling Lotus Gait. The imagery of a twisted truss to me elicits a visual of, picture a building with scaffolding on the outside, right? And then picture that some of the scaffolding is broken. So you have a building covered in scaffolding. Some of the scaffolding is broken. It's only partially broken, though, on the outside of the building. So every day you are expected to go on and climb up to paint the outside of this building. But there are tons of dangerous and broken sections, but we're supposed to paint the building anyway, even though there are no repairs. So if we stop painting, we will be chastised. But the scaffolding doesn't care because it's broken and it's not sentient. And the person who has hired us to do this work doesn't support us in our desire to have the scaffolding fixed. So it's similar to systems that are turning the US into like an economic Hunger Games before our very eyes, where we have to keep all of our businesses open right now, even though it's killing a 9/11's worth of Americans like every day or every other day during this pandemic, in a place where we have no national health care or universal health care, and an ever increasing reliance on benefit-free gig economy freelance work, like, delivering for Instacart and, DoorDash and all those kinds of jobs that come with absolutely no social safety net. But so our scaffolding as a society is twisted, it's strangled, it's broken, and we have to climb out on that godforsaken scaffolding and paint that building, even though we might fall through the broken parts of the scaffolding. And each day where the scaffolding doesn't break, we need to dull our pain from the stress of being on that freaking broken scaffolding all day. We modify the way we walk. We survive one more day knowing our systems are choosing to cripple us, to put us in this Lotus Gait, this painful walk. And it's the worst movie I've ever seen, man. I tell you what. And I can't stop thinking about this. Ever since I read this today, the strangled, twisted trust that shores up each of us, I can't stop thinking about a piece of scaffolding breaking beneath my feet on any given second of any given day and falling through the cracks of this twisted society that we live in. And it's got me feeling a little down.
Well, I think that metaphor did a great job explaining also a great metaphor.
Yeah, man. So what did you find on some YouTube comments?
So I found a couple. One said, it's like this album put on its glasses.
Oh, weird. Whoa. It's like so it brings the world into focus, right?
Yeah.
So everything is unclear, and then you put on your glasses and you're like, whoa, this actually really sucks. So I found one that said, powerful track. I'm one of the nostalgic people that were stuck with how to clean everything. I'm rediscovering them with this album. So nice. I say kudos to that person, because I think that is a great decision.
Yeah, another says, kind of rediscovered this album during all these protests.
Yeah, I mean, this summer, the failed states thing, the fact that the House of Representatives is trying to overturn an election where the president-elect won by over 7 million votes. And only in the United States could a person win a popular vote by 7 million people and have an election be in doubt. So that be a lesson to you all that are listening from other countries. Don't do what we're doing, because it is crap. Another one that says there is only one genre of music to describe propaganda: genius.
Nice.
Which I love that one.
And I got one more. It says, play as loud as you can, then turn it up more.
Dude, I got this new Focusrite Scarlett audio interface that I'm recording through right now, and I've got these studio headphones plugged into this little box right here, and my headphones sound so good right now.
Nice.
And so I've been listening to all my music through these studio headphones running through this audio interface, and so I agree with that comment as well, because I was jamming while reading that tab book today, and it was awesome. The last one I found is, who cares what they sound like? These lyrics speak the truth. And I really love that comment, because yes, this song rocks big time, but I listen to a lot of music that doesn't sound like this. Like, one of my favorite singers is Tallest Man on Earth from Sweden, or First Aid Kit, or Band of Horses. I like all these other kinds of bands. Sometimes I get down with a little My Morning Jacket. Those bands could sing these lyrics also, and I would be like, damn, those are some good freaking lyrics. So this band is, just as much authors and poets and social commentators as they are musicians. And that's something that I really appreciate about Propaganda, especially like the lyrics that they've written over the years, is that it could be sung by any genre and I would still be
Mm,
like, whoa,
yeah.
those lyrics are marvelous. So that's something that I really liked about it, is the person's like, I don't care what they sound like. These words are fantastic. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm with you on that. So Keith, what did you learn on this song? What's your big takeaway lesson?
Greg, I have a few takeaways from Lotus Gate. I think one is not to be drawn into the cult of self-worship, the false assumption that our modern way of life is better or best. Lotus Gate also makes me think about what I've substituted in place of meaningful living. And though I don't watch a whole lot of TV, and the last few months, social media hasn't really been my pacifier, but I know that I check out from reality in ways that aren't always productive, making it harder to communicate my struggles, the darker scenes that maybe I've cordoned off. And to me, this song is about really communication, being open with the ones that you love, checking in on them when they're in need and even when they're not, and being honest when I need a life preserver thrown my way.
This song to me is about the ways that we purposely hinder our own abilities to function in certain ways through
Mhm.
avoidance of dealing with our pain. You, the listener, or you, Keith, your Lotus Gate might not involve breaking your own feet for the sake of vanity and sexuality, but think about what yours is. You know what I mean? And I can tell that you are. I feel like right now, like I feel like my life is just slipping past me. You wake up and all of a sudden you're 37 and it's a eerie feeling. And though I feel accomplished, I feel like I'm on a downward slide into an unknown abyss towards middle age and old age, where bit by bit I will lose the will to go on. I almost feel like if this keeps up, these feelings keep happening, I'll turn 60 and I'll just be totally over this. I have some chronic injuries in my back and my knee, and every day I climb out of bed into sometimes excruciating pain for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the day. And I'm like, can't imagine being 80 and living like this. Well, that sucks. And then that's just boom, it just was like the flipping the switch
Mhm.
of potentially having a terrible day. I've said it before on the show, but I clearly need some help. And this song makes me feel empowered to say aloud, I need help. And so if anyone out there needs help and doesn't quite yet know how to do it, I am with you. And that is my lesson takeaway for this song. So Keith, why don't you go ahead and rate this?
I was thinking for the longest time, this was my favorite song on Failed States. The personal stories combined with social commentary on top of a dark yet melodic tune felt like something utterly new from the band. Although it's not my favorite song on Failed States anymore, it's still one of those tracks where somehow I find something new musically and lyrically pretty much every time I sit down and listen with purpose. So, Greg, I'm going to give it a 4.5, 4.5.
Ooh, interesting. I'm going to give it a 5.
Boom.
This track sequence of 11 and 12 of Lotus Gate into Duplicate Keys Akaro is, to me, perfect.
Yeah.
We need to do some songs soon for these episodes that aren't very great. so I can be harder in my rating. You know what I mean? We're doing like Name and Address and Mate Kamarisa Kun Rasikan and then Lotus Gate. And I'm like, God, all these songs are incredible. So we need to do some bad songs soon. Do those exist? But I love that this song has a timeless topic. We could be talking about ancient foot binding 1 second, social media addiction the next. We could also have gotten into drugs and alcohol and self-sabotage. I mean, we could talk about anything with this song. And as long as human beings exist, we will have these struggles and these vices. So the timelessness of the content, while also being titled with an ancient Chinese custom that is troubling, is really, really surreal to think about. And today I actually, kind of bent my toes under my foot and I was like, that didn't feel good. And it's something that's unimaginable. So it's got me thinking about having something done to myself that I had never considered before. There's so much here. It just transcends centuries. Unfortunately, this will be relevant for all people forever. So I'm giving it a 5. That is our episode on Lotus Gait. What fun. I had a great time singing a lot on this episode. So I apologize for punishing everybody out there. I just couldn't help it. I've listened to 3 or 4 different covers of this. Shout out to Jen Fiorentino, whose cover is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So great.
Every time I hear one of her covers that I hadn't heard before, I go, okay, that's my new favorite one. And right now, Lotus Gate is my favorite Jen Fiorentino cover.
So great. Thanks to Jen again for being on our show back on the last Will and Testament episode. If you want to find us, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at the handle propagandipod. You can email us at propagandipod@gmail.com. I do my best to write back to everybody, so thank you for your notes of encouragement and support. Keeps me going, y'all. Y'all rock. I love your emails. Some people send me long emails too. It is amazing. And I try to write back. I go all in on those emails. I love it. I've met some cool folks. I've gotten emails from people in the military. I've gotten emails from folks who live in Canada, who live in the US, who live in Europe, who live in Mexico, who live in Brazil. It's just wild, man. Surreal. Because we're just dudes.
Yeah.
Hanging out in Indiana and New York. It's
Right.
really, really great. But we will be back next time, and I think you'll like our next song selection as well. We finalized that the other day. So thank you, as always, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bright on blue, bright your eyes, shines a painful light on the guilt, the fear, the shame. The courage never came from the plasma glow of the home entertainment prisons we cling to like.
I don't have the words for it.
No, I don't
but-
either. We're dumb. So keep wanting to sing. I have this recurring nightmare, flailing prison, broken feet, frozen solid to the freezing pavement. I turn away as if I do not see.
Yeah.
I have this childhood memory. Boom.